Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting Eurofound to this conference and inviting us to present some results of our research on the role of work for achieving work-life balance. Work-life balance is not a very well-defined concept. I would argue it's probably also not necessary to have a very clear definition, because quite frankly, it's rather intuitive and it's depicted, I think, quite well on this slide here. It is the struggle to juggle at the same time all the requirements of working life with all the demands and requirements of life outside work, children, partners, exercise, hobbies, etc. So you see it depicted nicely on this screen. And then, of course, there are the more philosophical questions along the lines of, is work-life balance a good term? Should we really be putting work before life? Should it not be the other way around? Or there are people who would argue that it might not even be such a good idea to try to attain this elusive balance between work and life, because it could lead to us not being very good at anything, at either work or life. I also wanted to share with you an interesting thought depicted here. I like the phrase work-life harmony. Balance implies there is a strict trade-off. Being a productive member of a team at work makes me better at home, and if I'm happy at home, it makes me a better employee, a better boss. I think that's an interesting concept, and you might be interested in knowing who said this. No other than Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon. It does, of course, make you wonder, what does he do to achieve a good work-life balance? But let's move from these more philosophical questions to the question, why is work-life balance important? And the first thing that we need to be aware of and look at is the fact that the lack of work-life balance, the fear that it is not possible to balance work and life, can be a barrier to work. In the European Labour Force Survey, you have a question that asks respondents whether or not they're not working or not working full-time because of lack of available or affordable care services. And as you can see from the graph here, around 1% of the working age population in the EU says that is the case for them. And that, by the way, is almost exclusively female respondents, women who reply they're not working or not working full-time because of lack of availability of affordable care services. Now, you could argue, well, 1% of the labor force, that's not really that much, but 2019, this 1% is 4 million people in Europe between the age of 15 and 64 that do not work because of these problems. And that, of course, is a huge loss of talent. As you can imagine, there are many differences between countries when you look at these figures. There are countries like Denmark, Sweden, Finland, by the way, also Latvia in this category, with almost no respondents giving this reply. And then there are other countries like my host country, Ireland, where almost 4% of respondents say, 4% of the working age population say we do not work or we're not working full time because of the availability. And in Ireland, a very important factor, certainly, the cost of childcare. But it's not only about a lack of work-life balance being a barrier to work. Work-life balance has also much wider benefits. And we look at the question of work-life balance in two of our Europe-wide surveys, in the European Working Conditions Survey and in the European Quality of Life Survey. And these correlations here show quite clearly that a good work-life balance leads to higher levels of satisfaction, not only with work, but also with life. It leads to more happiness. It leads to a lower share of respondents saying that they feel socially excluded socially excluded. And very important, this finding here, and Professor Las Heras has also mentioned and pointed to this from her research results, better work-life balance is correlated with higher engagement at work, and higher engagement, we know, leads to higher productivities of employees. Now, keep in mind, the researcher in me needs to remind you of this. These are correlations, so there's not necessarily a causal relationship here, but actually literature confirms that, yes, a better work-life balance leads to better health, engagement, and work outcomes, and therefore also better outcomes for productivity. Next question, how do Europeans feel about their work-life balance? So the question, how do your working hours fit with your family or social commitments outside work, is a question in the European Working Conditions Survey. And as you can see, it's actually quite good news, because 4 out of 5 respondents say, well, it fits very well, or at least it feels well. 4 out of 5 also means that around 20% of respondents say no, they do not fit very well, or they do not fit at all the balance between the balance that I would like to achieve. So we can also look at this from another point of view, so not asking about the work-life balance, but asking about work-life conflicts and life-work conflicts. And here you can see the first 3 questions are about work impinging on life. So too tired after work to do household work when you come home. Kept worrying about work when not working. That's the indication also for burnout very often. Job prevents from giving time to family. And we see that around 12 to 20% of respondents say that they are experiencing this. And then we have a second category, the yellow here, where we ask about family work conflict. So it's hard to concentrate on the job because of family, or family prevents from giving time to the job. And that is a conflict that exists, but for a much lower share of workers in Europe, around 5%. Now, one of my main messages, I think, for this presentation is that it is hugely important to look at this from a life course perspective, because it's easy to understand that, of course, the kind of conflict you experience and the difficulties you have for balancing work and life depends very much where you are in your life. So a single person with no children, of course, has very different needs and demands than a couple with young children, a couple with older children, or then couples with no children to take care of any longer in the household. So very, very important to look and keep an eye on the life course. Have a look what it looks like when you keep this life course perspective in mind. Blue dots here are men, the green dots, the responses of female respondents. So it's basically a reversed U shape that we see here, which shows clearly that poor work-life balance is the biggest problem during child-rearing years when children are in the family. What we also see, interestingly enough, is that this is a bigger problem for men than for women. Women experience the biggest problems with work-life balance when they have young children, children under the age of 7. But afterwards, as you can see, actually there is an improvement, and fewer respondents say that their work-life balance is poor. Why is that? Well, it is very, very closely linked to working hours across the life course. And again, if you compare the blue dots, men, with the green dots, women, you can see that men increase working hours during the life course, even during the child-rearing stages of the life course, whereas women reduce working hours when children come into the picture. And that explains why, as you saw in the previous slide, the work-life balance conflicts and the poor work-life balance is a bigger issue for men than for women. I'm going to show you a slide which I think is important, gives important information, something that we need to keep in mind. Because this shows here that this is not exactly or not necessarily what people want, what workers want. When we ask about preferences of working time, would you like to work less if there was no impact on your income? So a very hypothetical question. A much higher share of men than women during those child-rearing years say, yes, if I could, I would like to work less. This, however, is not exactly what we see when we look at the sharing of paid and unpaid work between men and women. What you see here, blue bars for men, that when it comes to paid work, it's very much concentrated around the 40-hour per week mark. For women, you have a lot more women below this 40-hour per week mark. And that, of course, is explained by the fact that around a third of women in Europe work part-time. And now if we move to the right, to the unpaid work, you see a concentration of men among those doing 0 to 5 hours of unpaid work per week, whereas for women, you can see that they work a lot more in unpaid tasks, caring for children, housework, etc., than men do. Question, has this changed during the pandemic? And I can show you here very fresh data from our online survey that we conducted in a first wave in April of last year and a second wave in July of last year. So you see the July results here. And it does show, in this case, women are the blue bar, men are the green bar, that especially when young children are present in the household, women spend a lot more time, hardly in some cases, double the time on childcare in July 2020 than men. And the picture for housework is not much different. Also here, women spend a lot more time on housework during the pandemic than men did. And this, I think it's important to keep in mind, and this in a situation where 48% of workers in the EU were either partially or fully working from home. So I think that's very interesting to look at this, at the development during the last year, during the pandemic. Unsurprisingly, this attempt to balance care responsibilities for children, housework, and work commitments during the pandemic lead to an increase in work-life and life-work, family-work conflicts. And again, here women are more affected than men, especially, you see, especially a big difference for the family work conflicts. Women found it much more difficult to concentrate on the job because of family, to give the time to the job because of family than men did this. And this is especially true for those working from home. So the big question is, what can be done about this? What is the role of work in achieving work-life balance? And here, back to the analysis of the European Working Conditions Survey, we have looked which working conditions are helpful for attaining a good work-life balance and which working conditions are negative. So working time is the key factor. Long working hours, long commuting time is clearly associated with poor work-life balance. But it's not only about the volume of working time, it's also working time regularity. Regular working time, the same days every week, the same hours every day is positively associated with with work-life balance. That's important to keep in mind when later on we talk about flexibility of working hours. So regularity is good. Atypical hours, night work, shift work, weekend work are detrimental to work-life balance. Job intensity, very stressful jobs, high demand jobs, high emotional demand jobs are also negative, have a negative correlation with work-life balance. Good news is, and again, Professor Las Heras has pointed to this as well, support at work, support from co-workers, support from managers can make a huge difference and are positively associated with good work-life balance. Care responsibilities, negative if you have care responsibilities, even if we control for all other factors, that makes attaining a good work-life balance more difficult. And the last two there, the flexibility of working hours and working at home, are ambiguous, are mixed, and that's why I wanted to spend a bit more time on this. Working time flexibility, it's a specific type of flexibility that is really, really useful for attaining a good work-life balance. Being able to take an hour or two off in a family emergency has a very strong and positive effect on work-life balance outcomes. And you have this possibility in all likelihood, or you're more likely to find this type of flexibility in work arrangements, when flexible work arrangements are in place at the workplace. So flexible working time arrangements in principle have a positive effect, but only if they're not only there on paper, but they lead to this kind of flexibility, being able to take an hour or two off when needed. Working at home, as I said, is equally ambiguous. Working at home, telework, home-based telework, helps work-life balance if it substitutes working hours spent at the employer's locations. I work 3 days a week at the employer's premises and 2 days at home. So I substitute what I would otherwise do at the employer's premises. Working at home does not help when it supplements what I do in the office. So bringing work home because I did not finish what I needed to do in the office, because this then leads to working in free time for work demands. And we see this much more frequently for those working from home than those who work at the employer's premises all the time. And this, by the way, is something that we also saw very clearly during the pandemic. Here we have, again, findings from our online survey that we conducted last year. And you can see that those who worked at home partially and those who worked at home exclusively are much more likely to respond that they were working in their free time every day, or at least every day, if you compare it to the highest bar there, depicting workers who were at the employer's premises all the time. So there really is an issue between the blurring of boundaries, working during your free time when you are working from home. So the takeaways, the summary of what I have been trying to say in limited time. The benefits of better work-life balance are wide, and they go beyond employment and purely work-related aspects. They are also life aspects, satisfaction with life, social exclusion, etc., that benefit from a good work-life balance. Taking a life course perspective is key. The demands and needs of workers change consistently and substantially during the life course and depending on which stage of their life they're in. Volume of work, the hours you work, is crucial, but other factors at work can also improve work-life balance. Again, a specific kind of flexibility and support from co-workers and managers. Working from home can improve work-life balance, but only if it substitutes and doesn't supplement work done at the employer's premises. And last but not least, very, very important, the unequal sharing of unpaid work between men and women is a contributing factor because it puts more pressure on women to find this balance between work and life, which influences career choices. Career choices influence the gender employment gap, and career choices influence the gender pay gap. So the unequal sharing of unpaid work is a huge issue that needs to be addressed if we want to address work-life balance issues, but also gender employment gap and gender pay gap issues. I think this was it. There is, of course, a lot more to say on this topic, and I would like to refer you to the associated publications from which I have taken the results that I have presented here, the report on reconciling work and life in the EU, then the results from our online survey, Living, Working and COVID-19, and hot off the press, the latest publication there, our flagship report, Working Conditions and Sustainable Work, which also contains a number of case studies that show national policies, but also company practices in support of work-life balance. And actually, you have quite a few of the companies that we looked at in this study present at the conference today, so you can quiz them to share this good practice experience that we also presented in the report. And that would be me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes. All right, Barbara, thank you very much for your presentation. From your takeaway, one topic that I get together, absolutely, there is, these two things are absolutely connected. Change me if I'm wrong. So the balance between the gender is absolutely connected with the balance in the work and life, this sentence together. So it's everything that goes together.
Yes, absolutely, that's correct. We see that in principle, in normal times, work-life balance, as reported by respondents, is better for women than for men. But why is that the case? Because they adapt to the demands of the caring responsibilities they take on. And since they take on more caring responsibility, they have a higher pressure to find this balance. And to find it, they make adaptations, as I said, with regard to career choice, with regard to length of working hours, and that has an impact on income, it has an impact on pensions, it has an income on career development. So personally, I'm really convinced this is the one point where we should pay most attention. Mm-hmm. What can be done to get a more equal sharing of paid and unpaid work between men and women, between mothers and fathers.
Mm-hmm. The very interesting point was in your presentation, the life course perspective, where was the single people, then the young people with the children, the old ones. So the professional question for you is, so in this pandemic time, for which of these groups are the most challenging time, this pandemic time? To put together the working time and this balance between work and the personal life, for which of these groups?
Yeah, it's quite interesting to see that unlike in pre-pandemic times, women report bigger problems with achieving work-life balance than men. Usually it's the other way around. Right now it is, we saw during the pandemic, women find it harder, and they're especially women who have young children in the household. And the other group that is more affected, both men and women, compared to other groups in the labor market, are those working from home. When working from home with children in the household, work-life balance has become a huge problem, and work-life conflict is on the rise. Now, I think we all need to understand that, of course, the current circumstances are special circumstances. Your usual home-based telework job assumes that children are in school and in childcare facilities. So, and this is currently not the case. So we have to keep in mind it is a very specific situation. On the other hand, our pre-pandemic research on telework does show, as I said before, that there's a tendency to work during the free time, much higher share than for those who work from the employer's premises. And secondly, there is a tendency to work longer hours and to take fewer and shorter rest breaks between working days among those working from home compared to those who work all the time at the employer's premises. So there is something about telework that is not good for work-life balance. There are advantages as well, but we need to be aware of the risks. And especially that's especially important because we know that in principle, people like to telework. That's another thing that the pandemic has shown. In our online survey, 60% of those working partly or fully from home say that also in the future, they would like to work from home, not every day, but several times a month or several times a week even. So there is a demand for telework, and we have to be aware of the risks that come with telework and address them in time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you very much. Really good advices, and thank you for your time.